Right. So my next question is a double barrel question. Pew
Ooh.
pew. There you go. I've done that for you, Jen.
Ooh.
So it's one that's right end of right at the start of the process and one right at the end. So do you do anything to prep the clay before you start working with it? And the opposite end of that, how do you ensure that the final product is durable and food safe? Because obviously you're
Mm,
working with a lot of cups and bowls and whatever.
yeah. So first part of the question, I use a lot of clay directly from a company. So it comes to me in big bags. So what I typically do is think about what my project is. If I'm doing a bunch of mugs, I weigh out like a pound each, and then I roll them into a ball. If I'm using what they call recycled clay, but friends of mine, we call it garbage clay. So basically it's like all the clay body that you had left over, and then you have to like wedge it. So if you picture like your grandma making bread, and she's getting the dough prepped, so she's wedging it, she's getting all the air bubbles out, she's making sure that the consistency of the material is all there so it rises evenly. That's basically what I'm doing with the clay. I'm wedging it so that the water consistency is the same throughout the entire clay body, pushing all the air bubbles out. If you see videos of people throwing the prep on the throw, like once they get it on the wheel to center it, they're doing what's called coning the clay. So you're on the wheel. It's almost the same as kneading the clay or working the clay or wedging the clay on a slab. On the pottery wheel, they're coning the clay, which does the same thing. It's making the clay the same wetness throughout the entire thing. It's pushing any air bubbles or any kind of harder particles to the outside. So if you have like reclaimed clay, you might have a tool in there, or you might have like a chunk of something that you don't want to throw with that. Like you don't want to catch it on your fingers. So that's,
you might find a
like,
wristwatch in there.
yeah. I mean, I found some crazy stuff in there. I found a sponge.
Ooh.
It was no good.
Oh.
And then what was your second question?
So how do you prevent it, how do you ensure the final product is durable and or food safe?
So when you do a firing process, you, number one, are trying to do what's called vitrification of the clay. So you want there to not be any area for moisture to build up in between the clay particles. And that means that the clay has been fired to the correct temperature. So when I say cone 6, I'm firing to cone 6, I have to reach a certain temperature for that, which I think is like 2,165 degrees Fahrenheit, or somewhere around there. And I will fire to cone 5 and let it sit for 20 minutes, which is about the equivalent of a cone 6. And when that happens, the clay itself, like the vessel itself, is shrinking and condensing all of those particles really, really, really tight. So there's no room in between the clay particles for water to exist. So that's one area that makes the clay itself more food safe. The other thing is the glaze. So having a good fit with glaze. Glaze is basically like silica, some additional minerals to give you color, and some other things to make it fit to your clay body. So if you have a cone 6 glaze and a cone 6 clay body, they should work together pretty well. But however, sometimes they won't, and you won't have a good fit, which means that when it's firing, the clay itself is expanding in the heat. So when it's ramping up to the correct temperature, it's expanding. And if the glaze isn't expanding at the same rate, as it cools, you're going to get what's called crazing. And that can happen either if it's getting too big or getting too small too quickly. And the crazing will create issues where you can get bacteria buildup in between those cracks. And that can make it not food safe. So you have to watch those two things. And then the third thing is making sure that your glaze doesn't have leaching qualities. So if you hear anybody say like, don't buy that Fiesta ware, it's radioactive, or don't buy that Fiesta ware, it's got lead in it. You don't want those chemicals leaching into your food, basically. So a high lead based glaze with certain uses can leach into your food and cause your food to have some carcinogen issues or some lead poisoning issues. So all of those things are important.
Watch out for the crazing, Jamie.
It'll be crazy.
I was just nodding along there, like I knew exactly what she was talking about.
I mean, it helped encourage me to keep talking.
You're doing
Or you
fine.
could have just been like, we don't care.
You said crazy.
Interesting.
We don't
It's
care.
interesting though. It's very interesting.
He said crazy. You said crazy,
We
and he
don't
was
care.
like, "Why are you talking about me?"
It's just like if you so you guys have the like oils that you put on your food safe bowls and things for wood turning, right? And you want to make sure that you're using a food safe oil, because it will again leach into your food if you use the wrong type of oil. It's the same thing like with glaze. It's just most glazes are not prepared with lead anymore.
There you go.